People think it's all happy and all sparkle out there. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And there goes a lot of planning and coordination and a lot of long hours into giving that sparkle, giving that amazing tournament, amazing event that you see on the television, or if you are out there looking at live.
Imagine orchestrating an event watched by millions around the globe, where every second counts, and world's greatest athletes gather to compete, pushing the limits of human potential, where emotions run high inside and outside of the stadiums. Behind the scenes, a complex world of logistics, strategy, and sheer determination unfolds, far from the spotlight but crucial to every triumph and heartbreak on the field. The professionals who bring their passion for sports and the rigor of planning to put together a colossal sporting event for the world to enjoy are sports management professionals. My guest today is Kanav Dosajh, a sports management professional and a former rowing athlete. Be it international sporting events such as 2023 Special Olympics World Games in Berlin, or massive commercial cricket ventures such as Indian Premier League's Kolkata Knight Riders, or his stint working with World Rowing Federation, Kanav has seen it all in the world of sports management. And today, he joins us to share the complex world of sports event management, the magnitude of planning and operational excellence needed to put together a sporting event, and what it takes to become a sports management professional. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. Hi, Kanav. Welcome to Career Calling.
Thank you, Pratibha, for having me. That's really great being out here. Thank you.
Sports is one of the oldest form of entertainment for human beings. I'm thrilled to unveil the behind the scenes details today. Let's first look at the whole preparation or all the things that are required for these sporting events that are often so massive. You have handled some of the massive sporting events like Special Olympics or the cricket events in India. I'm really curious to know the moving pieces. What are the main things that needs to be taken care of for a successful sporting event? Let's start there.
Okay, people think it's all happy and all sparkle out there. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And there goes a lot of planning and coordination and a lot of long hours into giving that sparkle, giving that amazing tournament, amazing event that you see on the television, or if you are out there looking at live. So just to give you an overview of things, there is a lot of different organizations or different government bodies involved in there, and a lot of other organizations that come into place. So it could vary as well depending on the event and how big the event is. For example, maybe something like a multi-sport event will have longer times and more organizations, whereas maybe a single sport event will probably be less complicated. But at the end of they both are pretty much equally complicated. Even when I entered into it, I never thought it would be this complex. I'll take an example, say something like an Olympic Games. So Olympic Games, usually the planning process is about 7 years that they have, the International Olympic Committee follows.
Wow.
So generally all the bigger events, if you look at it, say Special Olympics, World Games or Olympic Games, or say even FIFA World Cup or recently UEFA Euros, they usually have a lead time of about 5 to 7 years. Recently, the Olympic Games, the IOC, International Olympic Committee, changed their bidding process and they have, I think, increased it. Because as you can see, coming up, we have already 28 Olympic Games and then 32 Brisbane Games. So the Brisbane Games in 32 were announced, I think, on July 21. That was like just 2 days before the start of Tokyo Games, giving almost 11 years. And same was the case with LA Games. They were announced in 2017. So giving almost 11 years. So you can look at it. All these bigger events have long lead times because you need that kind of time for preparation and planning understand it better, I would say usually what happens is there is a bidding process. You go through it. A country or the national federation would show interest to be host, say for Olympic Games, it's the IOC, and they'll say, okay, we want to host. And then there is something called a bid book. So they build a bid book. So in the bid book, there will be different organizations involved. So you need a lot of guarantees, like government guarantees, local, which city is hosting, guarantees from them. Then you have federal, because if you have international people coming in, it's immigration, it's visa. The magnitude is quite big because you're catering to the world. It's just not one specific region, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And then, of course, the local relevant organizations, the city needs to be on the same page. Then you get the different stadiums, different facilities, even the event venues, which will be hosting them, where the football game is going to be, or where the hockey game is going to be, or where the cycling is going to be. These are the things that you need to decide beforehand when the bid book is being prepared. So once the bid book is prepared, you can say, okay, I propose, I'm ready, I want to host, say 7 years down the line or 5 years down the line, a certain event. And usually it comes from the government as well as the national sports. It could be the sports ministry or like every country has different, some have sports bodies which take care of it, or sports councils. And then when it's a single sport event, it usually comes to the national federation, or you can call the national governing body, which is the governing body for a particular sport. For example, I would say for cricket in India, it's BCCI, but the international federation would be ICC. Similarly, for each sport, there will be a national federation, national governing body, and then there will be an international federation. So that's the hierarchy. So the national body will reach out to the international federation for a single sport event. For example, if you have to hold a FIFA World Cup, that's football, soccer in the US. So the US Soccer Federation will probably reach out to the FIFA saying we want to host it. And then depending on that, with the help of the national governing bodies, or they will say, okay, we make a bid book, we make a proposal. And once that proposal is accepted, there is a voting, there is a process within the International Federation. The voting takes place at their congresses, and then they announce, okay, this, because there will be a few countries who will be showing interest, right? And then once that's announced, they're given out, and then the processing starts. And then there is something called local organizing committee is formed after the games or the event has been awarded to organize and conduct that event, deliver that event.
For the bid book, do they have to show some amount of planning already?
Yes, definitely. Okay. So to prepare a bid book, there are certain organizations, there are certain companies who just do this. They liaise with the governments, you hire them, and they help you prepare bid book. Bid book is not just like a 2-page document. It's a complete project planning document, and it's quite expensive. I would say sometimes it goes up to a few $1 million in there. You need to get it there. It's a complete. If you look some of the bid books, they are always available later on at the Olympic Museum in Lausanne, Switzerland. They are like these books. Like they are like grants, if you have to say, like they are massive, and they are like, it's so much in detail. It's a complete project plan, how it will be done, where the event, which sporting event will be taking place, which stadium they be developing a new stadium, will they be using the existing facilities, if the existing facilities, what is the renovation being done, what will be the capacity, how is going to be the marketing looking place, how is the local bodies going to be involved, what are the legacy. It's very much in detail and includes everything. Like what is the goal of the games, because you always have a message with it. The whole, how the money is going to be raised, how much funding is from the local bodies, how much is sponsorship, how much is broadcasting, all of those details. And it takes a long time. Even it can take from an year, 2 years, even 3 years to prepare just a bid book.
And now that means that there are a lot of people involved in preparing these bid books, right? Are those professionals like you, the sports management professionals who are hired? Are they hired much before even it is guaranteed that the event is going to happen? Am I right in that?
I would say there are different phases. that takes place. So usually, yes, there are, I know some people who did the same sports management course and they are working with certain companies which work on bid books. So it depends at what phase and what is your further down specialization that you choose. So yeah, there are professionals like me, sports management professionals who work in bid books. And then there are others who just go deliver the event, like the operational aspect of things. There are planning aspect of things. So there are different functional areas involved. So usually it's like when a bid book is prepared and the games are awarded, it's a very small team. You would have somewhere between 10 to 25, 30 people who have been there. And then once the organizing committee is set up and it's decided, the government says, okay, for example, saying for 2032 Brisbane Games, the Queensland government has set up an organizing committee. So now, so the team which was involved with the bid books, they might come in. There is a transitioning taking place at the same time. And then they start building a team. And it's like any other organization, you'll have a CEO, CFO, CEO, then you'll have different departments sorted. I'll give you an example for, say, Special Olympics we did. So there will be different functional areas. There will be sport, there will be protocol, there will be non-sport events, there will be marketing and sponsorship, there will be community engagement, because you have to do the legacy part of things. And then further, I'll put it down within the functional areas. For example, sport will have, say, competition management, everything that goes on the field of play. You need to have officials, you need to have the field set up for each sport if it's a multi-sport event. And then you will have sports presentation, all these announcements going on, the DJs going on, the music going on, the awarding ceremonies happening, the crowd to engage them. All of that comes into them. Then you'll have a sport development aspect where you'll be engaging officials, where you'll be recruiting local officials. For example, in tennis, you need ball boys. For football, you need line boys. So every sport will have something which will be required. You'll need some local officials. You can't have all the international officials coming in. And then with any such big event, the part of it is that it has to leave a legacy behind. If I'm hosting an event, what will I gain? My local assets, my local teams, my local community, everything should gain something from it, because once such a big event happens, it's the entire city, everybody is involved out there. And so you need to leave something behind, a legacy behind. So all of that is part of it. So you need to organize that. And then comes the operation side of it. Whether operation is further, you can divide it into venue management, each of the venues, because if it's a multi-sport event, you have 26 sports. Each sport requires a specific venue, a specific ground, a specific setup. So managing all those venues, and you'll have facilities managers involved. Sometimes you're using the normal existing facility. They will have their own management, which you integrate with, and you'll have a venue manager taking care of that particular venue, which integrates your planning, how the flows will happen, how the event will happen, how the scheduling will happen. Then you have volunteers, which is one of the very important departments. None of these games are possible without volunteers, believe me. And it's just not a few hundred, it's like few thousand volunteers. For example, at the Special Olympics World Games, we have almost 18, 20,000 volunteers. So the whole process of recruiting these volunteers, training these volunteers, engaging these volunteers, it's a big team effort. Two important departments are transport and CCW, we call it catering, clean, waste. So food, everybody needs, irrespective, you're an athlete, you're an official, you're a volunteer, you're a facilities manager, you're somebody who's just coming in. If you're supporters, fans, parents, whoever comes in, there has to be concession stands and there has to be all the meals being provided. And it's like you have to organize it for 25, 30,000 people. And it's not just one meal. It's like it has to be continuous and you have to maintain a certain standard, a certain nutrition part of it. You have 100 countries, 120 countries coming in. Everybody doesn't eat everything. So you have to take care of that. Then comes transport, of course. From the sport perspective, I have planned the competition schedule. I have set up the training schedules. Everything is out there. But if the athletes don't get the right food, don't have the right accommodation, they don't have right transport, nothing works. That is the another big department, accommodation. You have to accommodate, again, the same amount of thousands of people. And usually whichever city you are hosting, almost all the hotels get booked. So get contracting with these hotels. Then there has to be a standardization across as well. Because if certain meals are being provided at the hotels, it can't be one hotel is providing something else, the other is providing something else. Then you have, within transport, you have all these port of entry coordinations. There will be a team out there to host the country or the athletes coming in, and then to guide them, putting them on the buses, taking them to their respective hotel. Then you have media, marketing, sponsorship, again, broadcasting, big departments out there. You need to engage people. You need to make people aware that this is an event that's happening. And how do you do that? And then sponsorships, you have to take care of your sponsors. They'll provide you with deliverables, but you have to give some things in return. So taking care of those aspects of things. So you see all these brandings out there on the field of play. They all are just one big team. And then you have delegation services that are out there, international delegation services. I can just name so many of them. Tech plays a big role. You have result services, app development, all the latest tech that is being integrated. So you have third-party vendors, but then you are the expert out here. You have to tell them what needs to be put in on a certain app, what needs to be looked, what athletes will be looking at. So it's a lot of pieces out there that needs to fall into place.
That's humongous, right? Probably more than any other industry. I think it's a huge set of departments, so many moving pieces. You mentioned about the local bodies and the international bodies that are involved. I want to understand the different work settings the sports management professionals work in. Like all of these, are they employed by usually one organization, or is it more of a contractual basis who are hired only for that event? Can you help me understand the work settings?
So there are different places you can get involved into depending on your preference, your expertise, and your backgrounds. For example, there will be certain companies or organizations where you can be involved with them. And they, for example, work on one event. So you work for that organization on that event, and then they move into the next one. A simple example, I would say in tech, you have your teams and you have a client. So you work on a project for one client, and then once that project is done, the same person is working on another project with another client, do something similar, and you can be involved with these vendors, these third-party contractors, which get hired and get involved into these sporting events, major events. The other side of it is you can be directly hired by the local organizing committee, which I was working with. I was hired by the organizing committee, and these contracts are limited time contracts, like I said, event. It depends at what stage you get hired and what your niche is. So you can be hired somewhere before, say, from 4 years in advance to the event to, say, just 6 months for the operational and delivery part of it. I know a few people, their niche is on-ground operations. So right close to the event, say 6 months, 9 months out, they usually come in as contractors. They are basically freelancers. They come in as contractors and they help deliver the event. There is a specific term that is being used in that context in this industry. They are known as sport nomads. So you just work in one event, then you move to the next one. I know people, they work Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, Birmingham Games, Commonwealth Games, then they move to the Special Olympic World Games. Now they're working at the Euro 4s, even the Qatar World Cup, the FIFA World Cup. Like you can do as many as 3 events in a span of, say, 1 year. So yeah, that could be, some people get a kick out of it. And that's one way to go about it. And others can be employed by the local organizing committee and you can be continuously working
Mm-hmm.
for the committee till the end of the event, and a little later for post evaluation reports and knowledge transfer
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So that's a lot of paperwork, I would say. You can be working with the, say, for example, international federations for certain sport. I worked with world rowing for the sport of rowing. And within that, you can further be working on different, again, departments. But then you're more of a stable job, but you will
Mm-hmm.
be, say, wherever there's the world championship, wherever there is a under 23 junior championship, you travel Olympic games, you travel to those cities and then you come back. But you are continuously
Mm-hmm.
employed by these international federations. And these are one part. So this is one part of the sporting industry, I would say, which is more like amateur sports or in Olympic sports or multi-sports. But then there is another industry within sporting world, which is the leagues, the big bucks, the commercial sports. Like you have for cricket, you can say you have the Indian
Mm-hmm.
Premier League, and there are many other leagues in different countries. Within the US, it's big. For example, you have the NFL, the Football League, you have MLS, the Major League for soccer. And similarly, there is all NBA. And when you're working with these leagues, you can work for
Mm-hmm.
teams, which is a lot of work working for the team operations, the logistics for a specific team. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a totally different kind of a profile, I would say. I wouldn't say totally different. It's because I worked over there, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, IPL, and it's quite similar. The skill sets are transferable, but yes, it's a different ball game because if you're working for the league, then it's totally different. You have to take care of,
Mm-hmm.
say, planning the competition schedules, when the league is taking place, the timings, the matches, in collaboration with your broadcasters, and ensuring that all the teams they meet, they have certain compliances for different standards that are being maintained with respect to financial or other
Mm-hmm.
player transfers and stuff. So stuff like that. Within the leagues, you can further be, again, a similar kind of a job profile in either places would be, say, working for, say, in broadcasting. If you're working in broadcasting, it's still the same stuff. You're working with the companies, say ESPN or whoever is being contracted for that particular event. And in those places, so it's you're basically a broadcaster. It doesn't matter. They follow which event. So you go to that place. So yes, and
Mm-hmm.
whenever you go to a place, you will interact with certain people on the other side of the table who will be either employed by the local organizing committee or probably the league. So, and then of course, the new aspect of this is you work with the team. So, for example, say in NBA State Warriors or like in IPL, Kolkata Knight Riders. So you have to take care of the team operations, team logistics. Within that, then it further boils down to the event managers, the venue managers, to be
Mm-hmm.
team logistics, team operations, all of those things. And then it's always about putting the team first and the athletes as well as the financial resources or
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so those are different places you can get into working with the sports management background.
Yeah, that's great. On your profile, I noticed some of these terms that maybe this is the right time to unpack it. Like your expertise is cluster management, game delivery, integrated planning. Can you help a little bit on the career paths, different career paths? You kind of touched upon with all the different departments, but in terms of the skill sets one can develop, what are those look
I
like?
have been mostly directly involved with the planning and the operational aspect of things. I would say I've brought it in with my professional jobs before after I did my MBA, and I was working with business development and marketing, and then later on I was working with a lot of customer service and sales. So in the end, you're still interacting with so many people. And I think one of the important parts that I have is a lot of project planning and project management experiences. Plus, my niche is more like on ground or more like at the field of play that we call. So everything that happens at the field of play is where I've been working. So what is more important with cluster managers, for example, it's a multi-sport event. So there are different sports that are taking place. So you need to be working with different people out there to organize the sport. For example, biggest thing is writing the technical manuals, how the sport is going to take place, all the people involved. You work with getting technical officials, planning the field of play, how it will look, the dimensions are kept, and you have to work with of course, the venue managers. When you decide the competition schedule on what day, at what time, what event is taking place, that's exactly what I do. For example, I have to say, okay, the swimming competition for 100-meter freestyle for men takes place on 21st of June from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So deciding that, a lot of things go into place. First of all, I have to know that my venue is prepared for that. My venue managers needs to know. My broadcasters needs to know that which event is being, telecasted. And then my officials need to be aware. My transport teams, my accommodation teams, my catering teams needs to be aware of all of this so that the right athletes are there. And then mostly it's for the athletes and the audience, my ticketing people. So if they're going to sell tickets, and okay, this event is happening at this time at this date, so the events tickets can be sold accordingly. For the fans, it's important. For the family members, it's important. For the supporters, it's important. So if I decided that it's happening at this time, I had to decide from the operational point of view. At the same time, I have to decide from the other side of the audience, the viewer's point of view or the consumer's point of view who are consuming it. And I need to communicate it to everyone. Yeah, it needs to go to my tech team so that it's up on the app. It needs to go to my marketing team, my social media team, so they can build their own, social media engagements and stuff around that particular event. So that's where my niche is. And then, of course, we have to interact with all the different technical officials. And then we need to involve the international federations, the national governing bodies of federations. So that's where I have done most of the work. And then other thing I've done is a lot of development work. That is development pathways from the grassroots to the elite with the youth. So that's where I started with World Rowing a few years ago. And you do get exposed to the events at the same time because you need to run the programs, you need to run a lot of grants, you need to, for example, at an international federation, there are different national federations or governing bodies who have athletes who qualify for scholarships. And then you only have limited scholarships. Who do you give? They need to be brought to the certain high performance training camps, and you have to monitor their performances. Performance metrics are kept. You have to do a lot of project management work and documentation. You have to maintain those documentation. You have to follow a lot of compliance that goes with for example, with anti-doping bodies. You have that certain doping is not taking place. What are the documents done? Any different athletes, they're brought to certain camps, how their performance has improved or it has stagnated or it has gone down. What are the reasons for it? You have to sometimes interact with them, understand the micro, macro, meso factors around them. And then sometimes you have to take the hard calls where you drop certain person and you do not. And then there are a lot of things. Can be political issues around it. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have certain support with certain people. There are other programs, how to fit in what programs. So from the development point of view, you need to have a good knowledge of the sport. You need to understand the youth. And then you create a bond with the athletes. There is so much more that's out there. You have to run your venue dress rehearsals and test events to ensure that all your different moving parts are aligned with each other. They are on the same page. Yeah, they're on the same timeline. Because one thing is left behind, all other work stop. It's like a big machinery and you're just small moving parts in it. And all need to work at the same time, in sync, totally in sync.
How did you choose this line? You were an athlete yourself before. Was that what introduced you to this field, I would imagine? But how did you decide this is what I want to do? If you could tell your journey a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It's quite interesting. So once I was done as an athlete, of course, you see, if you're not into some of the bigger sports, As an athlete, it's not a lot of financial stability. Now things have improved. I'm talking about 10 years ago. Now things are so much different. And at that time, okay, you go, you do your undergrad. I did my undergrad in economics, and then I did a master's in business administration. It's a major in marketing and minors in finance. And of course, then you go into the industry, working in the corporate. But at the end of the day, your heart is still somewhere. So I was volunteering, helping with my local organization, running some like local camps, like these summer camps for youth and stuff like that, volunteering with a local championship. And then once I remember, I was just talking to somebody else how it came into being. And it was just like, oh, there was somebody and they were getting paid for this stuff. And they're like, oh, we do Asian championships and all these continental championships. I was, oh, damn, I want to know what it is. How do we get it? Then, of course, I started researching and there were different programs out there. Yeah, of course, there are everywhere now. We have some in India as well. But at that time, there weren't many or there wasn't any. And there were a few in Europe, in the States, in the US, there are quite a few. Australia was one place which have a few. And I had to just choose between some. And yeah, so there were, of course, financial burden and financial aspect of things. And it's just happened that somehow I managed to get into a program at the ASTS in Lausanne. And I think so each program has its specialization, and this one has more, I would say, inclined towards the Olympic sports or the amateur sports and those kind of exposure. And I think that helped me. Definitely from there, you build a network, you gain the knowledge of things, you know more about the Olympic movement, how it works, how different sports works, how the entire structure is, how the International Federation, National Federation, or Olympic committees, National Olympic committees, and how these things take place, or the things behind the curtain run. So all these broadcasting part of it. You have a certain educational knowledge, like you said, but like with any other job, it's on the job. You keep learning, you keep just understanding more, and you get your mentors out there, and it's just the attitude that you need to have a hands-on experience, to have an open mind. And of course, you carry your previous skill sets, your education with you, and you keep building on those. I think so far it's been quite an interesting journey and a hectic one. I can tell you this. I mean, yeah, there have been some tough times, but at the same time, we enjoy. At the end, it's like beautiful once you see that event happening. You see that opening ceremony happening, and then the closing ceremony, the emotions that go through. You can compare it to having a baby. You conceptualize, like I said, the event is conceptualized, the organizing committee is formed, and then that's like the baby is delivered, and then you raise it, the organizing committee grows from the planning phase to the operational phase. And that's how the strength of the organizing committee grows from, say, 20, 25, it can go up till 500, 800, and then it eventually goes down again to 50, 60, and eventually the committee is closed. And I think it's like you need a village to raise a kid. You need a village to run the event.
How important is the education to enter in this field? There are a lot of operational knowledge and skill sets that are required, looks like, which people in other industries also may have. How important it is to have a degree in sports management for this? Can anybody else enter?
So I think there are two parts of it. One is the planning part of it. So a lot of like project planning and project management. And to do that effectively, it's important that you understand the industry and the sporting event, how it works, because that's when the whole basis or the foundation is laid. So I have seen a few events where if the initial project plan is not well made or the bid book is not well made, and it comes from somebody who is not from the industry or has no industry knowledge or background, they will make something like any other term, and the budgeting goes haywire, the team composition is haywire. And then later on, you suddenly realize from the operational part, oh, certain team was more staffed or more budgeted and certain team is less budgeted, where it needs more budget for an optimum efficient operations. And then the entire budget for the tournament or for the event just rockets because you never took it into consideration in the first place. and the person behind it may not have the right exposure or right knowledge. So I think from the operational side of it, yes, like any other industry, I think you have skill sets which you can take out of this industry and apply to the other industry, and similarly bring in from the other industry. And there have been professionals who have done that, but at the same time, what an education gives you is a network. So once you have that network, that helps a lot. And of course, the basic understanding of the structure and the knowledge of the whole industry, how it works. Like you said, yeah, on the operational side, if you're just coming in and delivering, yeah, probably you probably don't need it. But if you're part of the entire planning structure and the whole delivery at the end, you need to understand. So it's always good to have some kind of education into it. It could be on the job, on training as well. That is also kind of an education, or it could be just a formal education with a course. So
If we start from, let's say, from undergrad level, what are some of the majors here in US and maybe in India, it's other specializations? What are some of the college degrees that gears you towards sports management?
I know in Europe there are certain bachelor courses as well with sports management, hospitality, and leisure. And I think it's similarly out here in the US. And then, of course, there are MBAs which focus on sports operations, sports management. Also, at the same time, if you are working, say, in certain tertiary sectors of things or certain contractors, vendors, you can be doing normal other degrees you bring in. For example, a legal will need to be a lawyer, and if you're working in the tech part of it, say app development, you may be a vendor for us, but you need to have that engineering degree background. Or if you're into logistics, you need to have that supply chain. If you're into, say, protocol and international relations, so a degree in that would help. And then, so it depends where you are working into it. I think the other way I would put it is it should be your mindset and attitude to always be open to learning new things. Because whenever you're working in a certain position, you need to relearn some things, and then you have to unlearn some things and learn new things. So it's a continuous process. And of course, I think as long as you're willing to work on yourself, as well as you have a passion about something, just put yourself out there, and I think you can work into the industry.
What about different sports? It looks like anybody who is a sports management professional can go and be part of any type of sports. How does one develop interest? Does that play any role? Like what knowledge you have about the game? For example, somebody may be very familiar with cricket and may not be familiar with, let's say, American football. Does that play a role? Like how does that is it part of the education or how does that work?
So I would like to say, of course, if you have a knowledge of a certain sport, it definitely helps if you're working that particular sport from say field of play operations and from the competition management side of things. But then in say tertiary activities, say if you're working with transports or accommodation or say logistics of things, it would not be that important. And then again, it's sport to sport, it varies because certain sports are very technical. So you need that knowledge into it. And certain departments which touch the sport or the field of play directly, knowledge of the sport definitely helps you with it. So it again depends where you are placed and what you are looking to do. But I think overall, it's always good to have a knowledge of the sport that you will be working in towards, because it just helps you to have that connect more and to understand the aspect or the needs of the sport. Sometimes I know people who don't come from a certain sport, they're like, oh, why do we need to do certain thing? And then that makes it a bit more difficult because you have to explain it to them, takes more time. And if you come from a sport, you understand the sport. You might not be coming, you must just have a inclination to a sport. You certainly will understand, oh yeah, this goes this way. Oh yeah, this happened this way. So from that perspective, of course, if you're working in a certain industry, it's always good to have the knowledge of that industry and that sport. Just makes things a little easier.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, This overall, the way you explained to me, it's such a massive undertaking, right? Preparing for a sporting event. And also, what is unique about this is your kind of a deadline is set. Unlike in other industries, I can speak for in technology industry, deadline is not always a fixed deadline. It gets sometimes more. Most of the times, it moves. So it must take a very different kind of personality to work in this field and be successful. Who are the kind of people you think are going to be likely to succeed in this field?
Well, yeah, I can say the ugly truth about it. It's not all glitz and glamour. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And like you said, Lisa, it's a lot of operational work. That's only, I would say, last 20%. That's the last mile. Because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But before that, all the planning, all the build up, all the details that have already been put into place, it's just you're putting it together out there. So it can be very overwhelming. I mean, I'm telling you, I have seen people having nervous breakdowns. It's a lot of long hours. And sometimes if you are into like a certain OC and you're always traveling, so you stay away from family. It's a lot of high stress situations. And the other part is there are no redos or retakes. I mean, it's a hard deadline. I mean, like if you look at any event, for example,
Yes.
let's say, like I said, like 5 years, 7 years in advance, it's already decided what event is going to take place and the dates are decided. I mean, to just say for example, Los Angeles 28 Olympic Games has already been decided that there will be debates happening from 14 July onwards till the 30th of July and the Paralympic Games from the 15th August to 27th August of 2028. So then this was not decided today. This was decided, like I said, in 2017. So you have to maintain and be there. So yeah, like I said, it can be very hard on you. It can be very mentally and physically demanding. And also it gives you a lot of mental and physical fatigue because there will be times when you're having 14, 15, 16 hour work hours and it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I've had nights where I have slept on fields waiting just on a pitch because my certain vendor for a certain thing is not yet arrived or my shipment is arriving at 2 a.m. at night. It's something that you should be willing to just say, okay, I'm willing to stress it out. I'm willing to take that stress and I'm going to handle it. You just need to be, you just have it. I've seen people, I know a lot of people who come in who are youngsters who first events, they think it's all glitz and glamour. And then the reality hits and like they're overwhelmed, they have nervous breakdowns. And you need to have that. I personally feel that it's important to have that a basic attitude and a calmness about it because things will go wrong no matter how much you plan. You have a plan A and you'll have a backup plan B and you have a backup of a backup always, like that's part of planning. But there will always something come up operationally when you're out there. Something will happen that just you need to have that attitude, that thinking on your feet, be very much calm under stress. And because sometimes everything around is just panicking, you need to have, if you're a cluster manager, you need to be there and say, okay, we'll figure it out. And then eventually, once you know how to handle that high stress, high pressure, I think things just get easier. And sometimes what happens is, maybe from the planning perspective, yes, things did not go the right way. But at the end, it's from the audience perspective or the consumer's perspective. They were like, oh, this is the best event we have been to. You ask the thieves, oh, this is the best event. And you know what went wrong behind. So you just need to have that attitude and this awareness of things that, okay, if certain things, okay, we can always go back and discuss and put it in after event reports and knowledge transfer for the next event or the next tournament or next organizing committee or the next cluster manager. This was what went wrong. But then, yeah, you have to have that holistic approach and overview.
For a high stress career like this, is there a tenure? Like, is there a typical number of years people work? Is there a career path to it? Can you give a little bit of insight into the average tenure sort of for this career, and then how do people grow within this career?
I think it depends what your personal and professional goals are. I have I have had bosses who have spent their lifetime and they retired at 60, 70 doing this stuff. There are others I know who came from different industries and they did for a while and they went back because it was just too overwhelming for them. And also the other part of it is something I want to put it out there is it's not as high paying a job as say maybe all the traditional jobs like say software engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, investment banker that so sometimes people think, oh, when I'm putting this much of time and effort, am I being paid? Because you're coming from the similar industries. I've had techies who got in here. I have had colleagues who were investment bankers. Then they were like, we were like, yeah, we were having stressful jobs, but we were getting paid equally. So that's also something to keep in mind. You have to have a passion for it, a think for it. And then the growth paths are good. Like you can eventually transition into, say, like any other organization, you grow the ladder, you go higher positions, manager, directors, the C-suite comes into play. And then you can always transition into these, like I said, vendors or service providers for these events. Be experts, be consultants out there. And a lot of people do that. I think it's a fair enough growth path like any other organization, any other industry. But yeah, it depends at the end of the day, your own personal and professional goals and ambitions, where you want to reach eventually.
Makes sense. Now, for people who are looking to get into this field, what advice would you give? What can they do to break into this field? And what are some of the resources that you would recommend?
I think the easiest way, like everybody doesn't want to go back to school and study because that's like one of the easiest ways to do that. But other than that, you should have start with volunteering. I think that's one way to get a feel of things because every sport, no matter every event, like I said, volunteer is one of the biggest departments out there. They need people and they look for people from all backgrounds, all professions, all age groups. I mean, I know I've had volunteers as young as like 16, 17 to as old as 75, 77. They come from all walks of life. And then eventually some of them do get inducted into the industry because they want you build your network, you build a relationship, you understand the niche of things, and then you decide, okay, I want to come into it. And that's, I think, one of the easiest and the best way that I would recommend for anybody, because if you're leaving something and directly jumping into it and not liking it, then going back, it's already a lot of stress and a lot of financial burden, and not everybody has that flexibility. And then, of course, a good understanding of the sport, like I said, always helps. And if you're very passionate about a certain sport, you don't have to do all these big events, multi-sport events. You can just go in for that particular niche sporting event. I mean, yes, the opportunity would be, of course, limited because then you'll have lesser volunteers. But if you go into a bigger event, a mega event, like they call these mega events, mega sporting events, it's the easiest way to enter into the field, I would suggest. Usually between like year to 6-8 months before the event, just keep an eye out and you will know where you want to go. And you can always look it up. They'll always have a website, a section about volunteering, and you can always sign up with them and they will reach out to you, or you can always follow up with them.
Thank you, Kanav. This is really, really great information. A lot of details about the industry that usually is not so known, at least to common people who are not into sports, right? Thank you so much for coming on my show and giving all the details.
Thank you, Pratibha. Thank you for having me out here. I hope this helps all your audience and anybody who wants to get into the industry. Wishing you all the best. Thank you.
This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. For more contents like this, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, or a comment. Thank you for tuning in.